Hello, you are to Storm to Truth, and this story begins with my name's Adam. And I never thought I'd be sitting here, writing this out, but I guess life has a way of throwing curveballs. I'm 42 now, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had it all together. Married for 12 years to Melissa, this tall, blonde beauty who always turned heads wherever we went. It used to make me proud, but you know what they say, when something looks too good to be true, it probably is. The first sign should have been her comments. You know, the little digs that seemed harmless at first but started to cut deeper over time. I remember when she told me at a neighborhood barbecue, "Adam, why don't you work out more? Tom from down the street, he's always at the gym. You could learn something." She laughed it off like it was a joke, but it stung. But, like a good husband, I shrugged it off. After all, Melissa was the kind of woman who attracted attention. I convinced myself I was just lucky to be with her, and hey, maybe I could be more like Tom. So I started going to the gym, trying to get my dad bod under control. Still, no matter what I did, it was never enough. There was always another Tom, another neighbor with a nicer car or a better job. It became a pattern. Other men were always somehow better. She once said, "Ethan just got his kid into that private school in Chicago. Too bad we can't afford something like that for our daughter, right?" I didn't even know what to say to that. I had a steady job, nothing fancy, an accountant, not some tech billionaire. But I worked hard, kept us comfortable. Yet nothing I did ever seemed to measure up. I was blind to the fact that these weren't just harmless comments. This was her way of telling me, over and over, that I wasn't enough. And the worst part, I believed her. Looking back, it's hard to believe I hadn't seen it before. The signs were there, clear as day. But as I said, I was loyal to Melissa. Loyal to the point of madness, I guess. After every little nitpick, every time she compared me to someone else, I told myself, she is who she is. She didn't mean anything by it. I would shrug my shoulders and go back to trying harder, giving more. I was constantly trying to fix things. We would fight, usually over something small, like why I wasn't as adventurous as some Jeff she met at work who went rock climbing on the weekends, and I would apologize. Always. Every time. Every time. And don't even get me started on the gifts. Every time we had a fight, I bought her something. Jewelry, clothes, a spa day. I guess in my head, I thought that this was love, making her happy, no matter what it took. But deep down, I think I knew something was wrong. It wasn't just about quarrels or comparisons, it was the distance. Melissa was always on her phone, texting someone or sneaking out to answer the phone. And then there were the work trips. She works in marketing and would occasionally go to conferences, but lately there have been more weekend trips on business. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. She had a career, and I respected that, but something about the way she started dressing for these trips, heels, short skirts, perfume that she never wore around me again, didn't add up. I chalked it up to paranoia. Don't be like that, Adam, I told myself. I didn't want to be an insecure man who questioned every little thing, so I buried my doubts and just kept moving forward, convincing myself that everything was fine. After all, I had been faithful to her for over 10 years. She wouldn't do this to me, would she? We had a daughter, a life, a future together. I trusted her, even when I shouldn't have. And then came the night when everything changed. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Melissa had just returned from one of her business trips to New York. She behaved a little aloof, distant, as I had become accustomed to. We had dinner in silence, and she spent the rest of the evening glued to her phone, while I pretended not to notice. When she went to bed, I was still sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, but not watching it. Something was wrong. I couldn't shake this feeling, so like an idiot, I went to look for answers. I waited until she fell asleep and then grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My heart was pounding, maybe because I had never done anything like this before. I told myself it was just a quick glance. No harm, no foul, just a way to calm myself down. I unlocked it. Melissa never bothered to change the password. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe some innocent messages with friends, maybe confirmation that I was just being paranoid. What I didn't expect was what came right away. A message from him. Eric. Can't wait to see you again, baby. Last weekend was amazing. I'll book a hotel for next time. I stared at the screen, feeling like the ground had just left my feet. There it was, in black and white, the truth I had been ignoring for months. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach turning with each text. There were photos of her, all made up, nothing like the woman who had barely recognized me at home. There were videos that I didn't want to see, and suddenly everything came together. The nightly texts, the business trips, new underwear that she didn't wear for me. I felt like a fool, someone who should have seen it coming a mile away but didn't. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen with thousands of thoughts running through my head at the same time. Should I wake her up and face her right now? Should I scream at her or throw the phone across the room and demand answers? But I did none of these things. Instead, I just sat there in the dark with my phone in my hand, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. 10 seconds of attention. Thank you very much. I want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel and put a like. If you have any questions, write them in the comments. I will answer each one. And let's go further. I stayed awake that whole night, just sitting there in the dark, my mind spinning in a million directions. I couldn't process it. Couldn't believe what I'd just seen. I felt like my entire world had been flipped upside down in a matter of minutes. Eric, the guy I'd never even heard of, was apparently the man my wife was sneaking around with while I sat at home playing the perfect husband. It was almost 4 a.m. by the time I finally got up from the couch. I couldn't stay there any longer, drowning in my own thoughts. I made my way into the kitchen and stood by the sink, staring out the window into the empty street, hoping to feel something, anything. But all I felt was numb, and then the anger hit, like a slow burn turning into an inferno. All the time she put me down, compared me to other men, made me feel small. It wasn't me, was it? It was never me. It was her, cheating on me, making me feel like I was the problem while she was off screwing Eric in some hotel. I should have confronted her right then, marched into the bedroom, shaken her awake, and demanded answers. But instead, I just stood there, feeling stupid. Why did I always try to fix things? Why was I so blind to this for so long? Morning came, and Melissa strolled into the kitchen like nothing had happened. She poured herself some coffee and sat down at the table, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Like she hadn't just blown up our entire marriage. I watched her for a minute, waiting for the guilt to show on her face, but it never did. "You okay?" she asked, not even looking up from her screen. I wanted to laugh. Am I okay? What was I supposed to say to that? That I knew? That I'd seen everything? That I'd read her disgusting messages with Eric, and now I was standing here, wondering how the hell she could look me in the eye and act like nothing was wrong? But instead of blowing up, I said, "Yeah, just didn't sleep much." She didn't even question it, just nodded and kept scrolling, like my lack of sleep was the most normal thing in the world. All day, I felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. I went through the motions at work, pretending I was fine, but inside I was boiling. Part of me wanted to confront her right away, but another part of me needed to plan, needed to figure out what I was going to say, how I was going to handle this. The old me would have bought her flowers or planned a nice dinner, hoping we could talk through our problems. But now, I didn't even know who she was anymore. That evening, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit on this any longer. The second she got home from wherever the hell she'd been, another meeting with work, I was going to confront her. The door creaked open around 8 p.m. Melissa walked in, still wearing that tight black dress she'd worn to her meeting, her hair in perfect waves. She gave me a smile as if nothing had changed, like she hadn't been out with him. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down on the table. "How was your day?" It was surreal. Her talking to me like we were just two regular people living a regular life. Meanwhile, I had all her dirty secrets on her phone, burning a hole in my pocket. I couldn't keep it in anymore. "Who's Eric?" I asked, my voice flat, cold. She froze. It was like watching someone realize they'd been caught red-handed. For a split second, her face went pale, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for a way out. But then, like the pro she was, she composed herself. Melissa always had a way of turning things around, of making me feel like I was the one who was crazy. "What are you talking about?" she said, feigning innocence. I didn't play her game this time. I pulled out her phone, opened the messages, and tossed it on the table. "That!" Her eyes flickered to the phone, and for a moment I thought she might try to deny it. Lie. Twist the story. Make me feel like I was overreacting. But instead, she sighed and sat down across from me, her hands clasped together. "Adam, don't!" I cut her off. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. "How long?" She hesitated, then finally said, "About 6 months." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. 6 months. Half a year. All this time, I'd been bending over backward, trying to make her happy, apologizing for every fight, buying her gifts when she was off with this guy. How many times had she come home late with some excuse about work while I sat here like a fool, waiting for her? I stood up, pacing the room, my mind racing. Why? It was all I could manage to say. She stared at me for a second before speaking, her voice softer now, like she was talking to a child. Adam, you're a good guy, but… I stopped dead in my tracks. Here it comes. The same line I'd heard 1,000 times before. The "you're not enough" speech. But what? I snapped. I'm not exciting enough, not rich enough, not Eric enough? Her lips pressed together. I didn't mean for this to happen. That line made me want to laugh. Of course, she hadn't. People like Melissa never mean for things to happen. They just do, right? Like it's all some big accident. You didn't mean for it to happen? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You've been sleeping with him for half a year, Melissa. Don't give me that. She didn't say anything for a moment, just sat there, looking at me with this half-pitying, half-defensive expression. Like she wanted to explain herself, but couldn't be bothered to do it right now. Look, she finally said, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you, but… I cut her off again. I didn't need to hear her list of excuses or apologies. But what, Melissa? You didn't think I'd find out? She stood up now, her posture stiff. I don't know what to say, Adam. I never wanted to hurt you, but I haven't been happy for a long time. There it is, I thought. The classic line. She wasn't happy, so it's not really her fault, right? I looked at her, feeling the last bit of respect I had for her evaporate. Yeah? Well, guess what? Neither have I. There it was, out in the open. The lies, the cheating, it all hung in the air between us. And instead of feeling better, instead of some kind of relief that I had finally confronted her, I just felt empty. Melissa didn't seem fazed. She crossed her arms, leaning against the kitchen counter, as if this was just another one of our countless arguments, something we'd eventually brush under the rug like we always did. But this was different, and deep down, I think she knew it. So, what now? She asked, like we were deciding what to have for dinner, not talking about the end of our marriage. The calmness in her voice, the way she stood there, so unaffected, it drove me nuts. How could she be so casual about all this? How could she act like this was just some inconvenience we had to sort out? I felt my fists clench, and I had to consciously force myself to relax. I wasn't going to blow up. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. You're seriously asking me what now? I said, my voice cold but shaky. You've been screwing another guy behind my back for 6 months, and you think this is something we can just fix? You think I'm going to forgive you? She didn't answer right away, just looked down at the floor, biting her lip like she was trying to figure out how to spin this. I don't know, Adam, she said finally. I'm just saying we've been together for so long. Do you really want to throw all that away? That question hit me harder than I expected. She was right about one thing. 12 years of marriage isn't something you just walk away from easily. We had a house together, a daughter, a life. But as she stood there, trying to justify her actions, I realized something. She was the one who had already thrown it away. Not me. Melissa, you threw us away the second you let him into your life. The second you made the choice to be with him, I said, my voice growing louder. I could feel my anger rising, but I kept it steady, controlled. You're asking me if I want to throw this away, but you already did that. You made that choice, not me. She didn't respond, just stood there, arms still crossed, as if she was waiting for me to calm down. It was the same look she gave me whenever she thought I was overreacting, like she was patiently waiting for me to see reason. But this time, there was no reason to see. There was nothing left to fix. I'll go stay at my brother's tonight, I finally said, needing space. I couldn't be in the same house with her, not after this. Her eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to actually take a step. Maybe she thought I'd yell, argue, or even beg her to explain herself. But leaving? That caught her off guard. You don't have to do that, she said quickly, her voice softer now. We can talk about this, Adam. Maybe we can try counseling. Counseling. The thought of it made me laugh, but not the kind of laugh you hear in happy moments. It was more of a bitter, hollow sound. Counseling? Now she wanted to work on things? After all this time of tearing me down, after making me feel like I wasn't good enough, she thought a few therapy sessions could magically fix what she'd destroyed? You're unbelievable, I muttered, grabbing my car keys. I'm done talking. I need to think. She didn't try to stop me as I walked out the door. She didn't follow me, didn't cry, didn't even say she was sorry again. Just stood there in silence, watching me leave, like this was some kind of negotiation, and we'd pick it back up tomorrow. As I drove to my brother's place, the whole situation kept replaying in my head. The way she acted so calm, so detached. I felt like I was going crazy, like I was the only one who understood just how much damage had been done. Was this how she'd been feeling this whole time? Disconnected, just going through the motions? I thought back to all those moments when I tried to make things better, those stupid gifts, the desperate attempts to patch up the cracks in our marriage. But Melissa never met me halfway. She never cared about fixing anything. She was too busy finding her excitement with Eric. When I pulled up at my brother Ryan's house, he answered the door almost immediately, and one look at me told him everything he needed to know. Ryan had been suspicious of Melissa for a while. He never outright said it, but there were plenty of times he'd told me, "You sure everything's all right with her?" Or, "She doesn't seem to appreciate you, man." I always brushed him off, convinced that I was just going through a rough patch. I was wrong. I didn't even have to explain much when I stepped inside. "It happened, didn't it?" he asked quietly, like he'd been expecting this moment for months. "Yeah," I muttered, collapsing onto his couch. "She's been cheating on me." Ryan didn't say, "I told you so." He just sat down across from me, a somber expression on his face. He wasn't one for drama, but he'd always been there when I needed him. "I'm sorry, man," he said after a long pause. "I never wanted to be right about her." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. Part of me wished I'd listened to him sooner, but another part of me knew that even if he had told me exactly what was going on, I wouldn't have believed it. I was too deep into this fantasy that my marriage could still be saved. That maybe if I just tried a little harder, I could get Melissa to love me the way she used to. "She wants to talk about counseling," I said, my voice heavy with disbelief. Ryan shook his head. "She's only saying that because she got caught. Don't let her guilt you into thinking this is fixable. It's not." Deep down, I knew he was right. But hearing it out loud, hearing someone else say it, made it real in a way I hadn't let it be yet. This wasn't fixable. Melissa wasn't going to change. She'd been eroding my confidence for years, and now I finally saw her for who she really was. I didn't want to spend another day trying to save something that wasn't worth saving. "I think it's over," I said quietly, almost to myself. "Good," Ryan said, leaning back in his chair. "You deserve better than this, Adam. Way better." The first night at Ryan's place was rough. I didn't sleep much, if at all. My mind wouldn't shut off, replaying every moment of my relationship with Melissa like some twisted highlight reel. Every argument, every cold glance, every time she made me feel like I wasn't enough. It all hit me harder than it ever had before. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell I had let things get this far. Ryan had set me up in the guest room, but it felt strange. This wasn't home. My home was with her, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. But as the hours dragged on, I started questioning what home even meant anymore. Was home really the house with Melissa, where I walked on eggshells every day, trying to please someone who was already checked out of our marriage? Or could home be something else, something better? By the time the sun came up, I felt like I had a hangover, but not the kind you get from alcohol. This was the kind you get from emotional exhaustion, from too many realizations hitting you all at once. I dragged myself out of bed, feeling like a shell of the person I'd been just 24 hours earlier. When I stumbled into the kitchen, Ryan was already there, drinking coffee and flipping through his phone. He looked up when he saw me and offered a weak smile. "Rough night?" "You have no idea," I muttered, grabbing a mug and pouring myself some coffee. I sat down across from him, the warm cup in my hands offering a bit of comfort in an otherwise shitty morning. Ryan didn't press me for details, and I appreciated that. He wasn't the type to poke and prod unless I was ready to talk. So we sat there in silence for a while, just two brothers trying to make sense of the mess that had become my life. Finally, I broke the silence. "I keep thinking about all the times she made me feel like I wasn't good enough," I said, staring into my coffee. "How she'd compare me to other guys, make these little comments like I should be more like them." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, man, I saw that. I hated how she'd do that to you." "I let her do it," I admitted, feeling the weight of my own words. I just kept thinking, if I could be what she wanted, if I tried harder, maybe she'd stop. Maybe she'd love me like she used to. Ryan shook his head, leaning back in his chair. "That's the thing, Adam. You shouldn't have to change who you are to be with someone. She was tearing you down, and you didn't see it because you were too busy trying to fix something that was broken from the start." It hit me then. I had spent years blaming myself, trying to be the better version of myself that Melissa kept hinting at. I bought her things, apologized for things that weren't even my fault, and changed parts of myself just to fit into this mold she wanted. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. And it never would have been. I rubbed a hand over my face, feeling the exhaustion settle deeper. "How the hell did I let it get this bad?" Ryan shrugged. Sometimes when you're in it, you don't see it. You're too close, you know? You convince yourself that things are normal when they're not. It happens to a lot of people. The important thing is, now you see it. I wanted to believe him, but part of me still felt stupid. I had been a fool, plain and simple. Melissa had been cheating on me for months, and I was too wrapped up in my own blind loyalty to even notice. But Ryan was right. I saw it now. I couldn't unsee it, couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. I wasn't that guy anymore. As the day went on, I started thinking about what I was going to do next. I couldn't stay at Ryan's forever. I needed to face Melissa again, needed to start making decisions about my life, about our daughter, about everything. It wasn't going to be easy, but staying in this limbo wasn't an option. I texted Melissa later that afternoon. We need to talk. I'll come by tonight. She replied almost immediately. Okay, I'll be here. That was it. Just a short, emotionless response. It felt like a business meeting, not a conversation about the end of a marriage. But then again, maybe that's what we had become. Business partners in the slow collapse of our relationship. When I showed up at the house that evening, it felt different. The place didn't feel like mine anymore. It was just a building now, walls and a roof where I used to live. Melissa was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, her hands folded neatly in front of her. For a brief moment, I remembered the first time we moved in together, how happy we'd been to start our lives here. Now, it all felt like a distant memory. Hey, she said, looking up at me with an awkward smile. Hey, I didn't sit down. I stood by the doorway, feeling like a stranger in my own home. We should talk about where we go from here, she started, her voice calm, almost clinical. I know this has been hard, and I'm sorry for everything, but we have to think about her. Our daughter, the one person who tied us together, whether we liked it or not. I nodded, knowing she was right. We couldn't drag this out. It wasn't fair to her. I want this to be over, I said, my voice flat but firm. I can't do this anymore, Melissa. I don't trust you. I can't live like this. She looked down, her face softening for the first time. I understand. Her tone caught me off guard. I expected more resistance, more arguing, but she didn't fight me on it. Maybe she was just as tired as I was. Maybe she had already made peace with the fact that this was over. Let's figure out the best way to move forward. For her, I added, trying to keep my focus on our daughter. That's all that mattered now. Not my anger, not her guilt. Melissa nodded. Of course, we talked logistics. Who would stay in the house? How we'd share custody. All the practical stuff that comes with the end of a marriage. It was strange, how emotionless it all felt. We were ending 12 years of our lives together, and it felt like we were negotiating a contract, not unraveling a family. But maybe that was for the best. The damage had already been done, and there was no point in dragging it out. When it was all said and done, I left the house with a sense of finality I hadn't expected. I wasn't relieved exactly, but I wasn't devastated either. I just felt done, tired, and maybe that was a good thing. I walked back to my car, the cool evening air hitting my face, and I realized something. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to fix anything. There was nothing left to fix. It's strange how quickly life can change. One day, you're knee-deep in a mess you didn't see coming, and the next, you're standing on the other side of it, trying to figure out who you are without the weight of that disaster on your shoulders. That's what the days following my final conversation with Melissa felt like, an uncomfortable mix of freedom and loss. She stayed in the house, and I found a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. There was something cathartic about the emptiness of it. No more awkward silences with her. No more pretending we were okay. Just me, 4 walls, and a mattress on the floor while I figured out what the hell came next. Of course, we still had to deal with the practical stuff. Divorce papers, splitting up assets, setting a custody schedule for our daughter. Melissa didn't put up much of a fight. It was like we both knew that dragging things out would only make it worse for everyone involved, especially our daughter. We tried to keep things civil for her sake, even though every time I looked at Melissa, I felt that sting of betrayal all over again. One evening, about a week after I moved into the apartment, Ryan came over with a 6-pack and some takeout. He dropped down on the couch and cracked open a beer, handing me one without saying a word. It was our unspoken way of checking in, just hanging out, no pressure, no questions. After a while, Ryan finally spoke. "You doing all right?" I shrugged, taking a sip of beer. "I don't know. I guess I'm better than I was." He nodded. "Good, you'll get there, man. That's what everyone says, right? You'll get there." But when you're in the middle of picking up the pieces, It's hard to believe that you'll ever really be okay again. What's next for you? He asked, glancing around the apartment. Gonna sit here in your empty bachelor pad forever? I chuckled. No, I think I'm done sitting around. I had been doing a lot of thinking in the quiet of that apartment. A lot of reflecting on who I was before Melissa tore me down and made me doubt myself. I realized that for years, I'd been walking around in this fog, thinking my whole identity was wrapped up in being her husband, being the guy who could fix anything if I just tried hard enough. And now that she was out of the picture, I was left wondering, who the hell am I without her? Ryan gave me a look. Good, because I was starting to get worried you were going to turn into one of those guys who only talks about their ex-wife. Trust me, I'm over that, I said, leaning back. It's weird, though. I thought I'd be more upset, but now that I'm out of it, I just feel done. That's a good thing, Ryan said. It means you're finally seeing things for what they are. You don't owe her anything, Adam, not after what she did. I knew he was right. Melissa had tried to gibber me down, make me believe I was less than, all while she was running around with Eric. But here I was, still Jabber. And you know what? I was Jabber to feel stronger because of it. A few weeks passed, and I gibber making moves to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work, Jabber with friends I hadn't seen in a while, and started focusing on myself for the first time in years. I even got back into some old hobbies, things I'd given up when I was too busy trying to gibber Melissa. It felt good, like I was Jabber in control of my life again. Gibber, one day something unexpected happened. I had been spending more time at the local Jabber shop down the street, using it as a place to think and clear my head. I didn't notice her at first. Jabber, the barista. She was sweet, with a quick wit and this infectious laugh that gibbered to light up the whole room. We'd chat here and there when I jabber my coffee, nothing serious. But over time, those little gibber became something I looked forward to. One afternoon, as I was leaving, she caught me off guard by handing me my coffee with a smile and saying, "Gibber, you ever want to grab a drink sometime?" I'm off, Gibber. It was such a simple question, but it felt like a jabber point. Like maybe, just maybe, life was Jabber forward. I smiled back, feeling that flicker of hope I Jabber felt in a long time. Gibber, I said, Jabber like that. A few months later, things with Jabber were going great. We weren't rushing into anything, but it felt Jabber, natural. We Jabber a lot of the same interests, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could just be myself. There were no Jabber to other men, no subtle digs, no pressure to be someone I wasn't. With Jabber, I was enough. Gibber, on the other hand, wasn't handling things as well. She had tried to reach out a few times, texting me, asking if we could talk or figure things out. She even gibber up at my apartment once, crying and apologizing, saying she'd made a mistake and wanted me back. I think the old me would have fallen for it, would have Gibber taken her back just because I was too scared of being alone. But not this time. I let her cry, let her spill out her gibber, but I didn't believe a word of it. Not after everything Gibber done. Jabber moved on. Jabber found peace, and I wasn't about to go back to the life where I was constantly second-guessing myself. You made your choice, Melissa, I told her, standing in the Jabber of my apartment, and I've Gibber made mine. She gibbered to argue, tried to remind me of the good times we'd had, but those memories didn't hold the same power they once did. I saw through her now. I saw the manipulations, the gibber, the way she tried to keep me small so she could feel bigger. Jabber done, I said, my voice steady, gibber over. And with that, I closed the door on her, and on that gibber of my life. Looking back now, I can't believe how far Gibber come. I'm not the same guy who spent years chasing after someone who didn't Jabber appreciate him. I'm Gibber not the guy who thought he had to change to be loved. I'm Jabber just me. And that's Gibber enough. If Jabber one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that no matter how lost you feel, no matter how much someone tries to tear you down, there's always a way out. There's Jabber always a way to rebuild. I've found happiness again. Not the kind of happiness that Jabber from someone else, but the kind you build for yourself. And in the end, that's all I really gibber you for watching new videos every day. See you soon.